All right, everybody. So I am Carl Bonnet. I'm the medical director and founder of Klarisana, and today I'm visiting with Courtney Szigetvary, who is our director of behavioral health at Klarisana. So this is really cool. I've interviewed a few people outside of the company, so today we get to interview Courtney, and who is our director of behavioral health. So Courtney is a LCSW-S for supervisory, right?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep. As for
cool.
supervisor.
Right
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
So cool. Well, thanks, Courtney. I appreciate your time today, and I'm hoping to talk a little bit about Matthew Perry, right? And
Yeah.
and you know the thing with Matthew is, of course, a lot of people are talking about him, and there's a certain amount of clickbait with this, and people just want to jump on the Matthew Perry bandwagon. But there's something about him that's kind of concerning that I want to make sure we get to set the record straight and kind of get this out there. And there's been a lot of quotes coming from his autobiography where he talks about this concept of ego death. He's
Mhm.
talking about ketamine. He's like, yeah, but the ketamine starts going at me, I just feel like my ego died and whatnot. And ego disruption or playing with the ego is it can be valuable as we know, but I just kind of wonder if he has the wrong idea, if this is being misportrayed. So if you could, in your practice at Clarisana, could you talk to me a little bit about, guide me through, what does ego death mean? What is ego disruption? I mean, do we even use that term? What's this all about?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's interesting. I think that a lot of people shy away from the term ego death nowadays, which it, in from like the lens of psychology, particularly Western psychology, I think that we do lean a little bit more into like ego dissolution or ego, um, you know, just like the dissolving ego. But in essence, there is this idea that the ego still like remains in some sense, or it can be rebuilt after one has a psychedelic journey or a psychedelic like journey. Um, and I think that what I like to do, just personally as a clinician, is I really follow where the client is going. So if they're about ego dissolution, which is something that I have, that's a term that I have been using a bit more because like I have thought from a more Western lens where it's like, well, the ego doesn't really go away. Like we're kind of looking at other parts of us or looking at, um, and the ego in itself is a part of us or a collection of parts of us, particularly if we're thinking from um, uh, even like an internal family systems lens. But if the client is saying the term ego death and really wants to stick with that, and it really felt like something happened to them where like a part of them might have passed on or have been rebirthed in a certain way, um, I might follow that. And I think that that's why, or I am going to follow that. And I think that's why talking with somebody before and even after your psychedelic trip, whether it's with ketamine, which we know is a dissociative but has psychedelic like properties, or other psychedelics, is important. I think that being able to work through what might have felt like death or really truly like that's the truth for that client, or that's the truth for that person that I'm sitting with, so, and holding space for. So if they're using that term, I might go along with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that's one of my concerns, right? That the word death is heavy, right? That's loaded, right? And
Yeah.
depending on how someone's approaching it, like, yeah, there's certain elements of my personality, or whatever, I would like to quote unquote die, but I certainly do not want myself to die. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so I guess that was when I first started reading these reports. I was a little concerned of like, was his treatment team finding out, what does this ego death mean to him? Is this actually more escapism or whatnot? Have you seen that with patients where like you'll, as you start to dig, you'll suddenly discover that you actually have you have a very different appreciation for what they're coming up with versus what you thought they may have been initially.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. So I think that there does tend to be a little bit of escapism with ketamine, with psychedelics in general. I have seen like some people definitely lean into that, and I think that there's also on the other end this notion of like we must do the work in order to like feel and get better. And it's like, what if having some like experiences where we are able to let go a little bit, actually that's what it means to start feeling better. Um, and I think that, yeah, we always want to be like careful with, like, we want to be mindful of wording. And I think that something that comes up for me as we're talking about this is thinking about Buddhist practice, even, and want to acknowledge that, I'm a white cis presenting like woman, and a lot of Buddhist practice, is that's a lot of like that's an Eastern practice. So I think a lot about the cycle of samsara, where in Buddhism they're talking about this death and rebirth that happens all the time. And I think that what comes up for me as we're talking about this is even that notion of like, what is it? What does death really mean? What does it mean to die? Is it something that could happen within this ketamine space and still be what we perceive as healthy? Can the ego come back? Is that why we're using words like disillusion instead of death now, or leaning more into that?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a great allegory or analogy, whatever you call it.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how many tie-ins there are to some of the Buddhist practices with what we do, and when I know I've used a lot of Zen analogies in my other videos. With I guess the other thing too, and I realize this could be a little bit of a loaded question, but of course in the later part of Matthew's journey, he of course was not working with clinicians at all. He was just obtaining,
Yeah.
well, at least not working with clinicians in what we would consider a ethical regard, other than to just provide him with the ketamine. So at that point, of course, there was no oversight, no working with them. I mean, it's just tragic, but it seems like that sort of underscores the importance
Yes.
of integration. Like, what are your thoughts on like trying to just do ketamine kind of without any kind of integration, without any sort of support?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just definitely want to acknowledge how incredibly sad it was, like how, you know, things ended with Matthew. And I think that um I think this is something that a lot of people speak about, like including something that I've heard Matthew speak about is our feelings of being alone. And I think that community is like the crux of what is healing, whether it's with psychedelic medicine or ketamine, or if someone's taking Prozac or anything else, or going to therapy is like, I think that what I've seen be helpful most for people is having that connection before, during, and or after. And that can be with like a therapist. So like we provide preparation and integration sessions here at Clarisana. We also do ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. So we sit with you throughout the journey, bringing in like what the client needs into that session and really holding space for that. And I think that that community, and your therapist could absolutely be a part of your community, and or doctors practicing ethically. And I think that a big part of having community is also practicing community guidelines in an ethical way. And when we're failing people at that, that's when we see tragic things happen.
Yeah, yeah, that's great points. Great points. So this is, yeah, just very tragic. It's unfortunate he didn't have better support with that. So, but wow. So I guess just in conclusion, then I kind of throw the ball back in your court, Courtney. Is there anything with regards to ego dissolution, with regards to how one wants to like utilize this therapeutically, you want to add, or maybe we've covered it all. That's fine too. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that something I do like to share with folks is that there's different paradigms to ketamine use when we're using it like ethically and wisely, and like from a community building lens, like building connections. There's different ways that we can use it, and I think that there is validity to them all, just personally. And by that, I mean, we talk about psycholytic doses. We talk about, so like those lower doses. We talk about those ego dissolving doses at higher doses. And, when we do ketamine assisted psychotherapy, we find a balance between that, like where people are kind of, we're we're going for like you're cruising at like altitude or like in the atmosphere as opposed to being to going to Jupiter, but you're also not down all the way on the ground. So you're
Right.
you're in between there. And I think that there's validity to all of them. You don't need to have a complete like ego dissolving experience if you're not quite there yet in order to get benefits from ketamine treatment, from other psychedelics even. So yeah, like if you're not there, if you feel like you're not there to be pushed off the edge of a cliff, like if you're not ready to dive in, that's okay too. You can still get benefits from this treatment.
Right. Awesome. Well, cool. Well, thank you, Courtney. I really appreciate your time. It's a great
Yeah.
discussion. Unfortunate circumstances that we have to have this discussion, but at
Yeah.
the same time, I think it's really important for us to talk about this because I hate for some of the naysayers to all of a sudden want to, be like, oh, you know what, one unfortunate situation will throw away the entire field, which, as you and I know,
Yeah.
is doing some great things. So, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much, and we will talk to you next time.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
All right.
Bye, Dr.
Take
Bonnie.
care. Bye.
Bye.